Thank you, Gretchen, for kicking us off, and welcome everyone this afternoon. I assume that most of you are somewhere trying to stay warm in the coldest day of the year. I'm sure that's also affected some people in their activities, and actually our teachers today are home from school, so they had planned on joining us after finishing up a day of work, and so they should be well rested for our conversation today. This is Dick Jones, and I'm joined by Jessica Williams and Nicky Morgan, two teachers that are going to be a part of our discussion this afternoon on Connect for Relevance. We want to try and make these webinars more interactive, so you can see us in our smiling faces this afternoon. And we'd like to hear from some of you and engage in some discussion around this topic of increasing relevance. Before I get into some questions and answers and some dialogue with Jessica and Nicky, let me share with you a little background on the Career Instructional Model and this particular element. This is part of a series of webinars that the Technical Assistance Center is doing on the Career Instructional Model. Last month we kicked off with an explanation of the model, and this is the first of 6 sessions where we're digging in a little bit deeper with each of these 6 elements. In each of these, I want to focus on having teacher practitioners share things that they're doing in their classroom directly that relate to this particular element, and we're going to be doing that today. The model reflects 6 elements that combine what we know about research and good quality teaching, but also particularly focus in on those skills that individuals need to be prepared for a career. Conveniently, they happen to represent the acronym CAREER in describing each of these 6 elements: connect with relevance, assess for proficiency, reward creativity and innovation, engage as independent learners, empower with hope and confidence, and rate work habits and collaborative behaviors. For those of you that haven't had some orientation to this, I hope that you go back and look at one of the previous webinar or the videos that we produced on this. Also, as a service to teachers, we've created surveys, and I'll be talking about those a little bit more at the end of the webinar. That becomes a very useful tool for you to reflect on your own instruction. As a convenient guide to go along with this, I've created a one-page flyer that you can download from the address that's on the screen. So if you want to have a reference to the model, that becomes a very convenient one in a nice one-page handout. Also set up a Twitter account under Career Model as an ongoing conversation about resources related to this particular model and all the instruction that it implies. So if you'd like to keep up on a regular basis, please subscribe to that Twitter feed. You won't be hearing a lot of extraneous information, but just references and links and resources that are great teacher resources that all relate to one of the 6 elements in the model. Our agenda today is quite simple. I'm going to do a little bit of review on this Connect with Relevance and what the description of it is, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jessica and Nicky to share some of their experiences and some of their teaching that is related directly to this, and we'd like your questions. As Gretchen said, you can click the hand icon to indicate you want to ask a question. You can do that at any time, or you can just enter a question in the question pane and pose that, and Gretchen will forward that on to me. I'm going to have them share some teacher practices about adding relevance, and then we can engage in some discussion. The Connect with Relevance is all about making instruction more relevant to students' own experiences, but also relevant to the real world and the work that we create for the students. In each of these webinars, I've tried to create a preview, a webinar that gives some background on this particular one, talking with some of my colleagues or experts that really provide a good reference to the research that I've become familiar with and helping to create this model over the last several months. This video is on YouTube with Linda Jordan, which is an interview that I did recently, and Linda describes the brain connections to why relevance is so important in our instructional planning. And I hope that many of you had a chance to view that webinar prior to today, or that video presentation, because it gives some nice background. If you haven't, please do that. Here's the link, but we'll also put the link up for any of you to follow up with as well. Let me just find out, those of you that are here, we'll do a quick poll question, whether you did view that preview with Linda Jordan. So if you go to your screen now and indicate yes or no, this isn't taking attendance or seeing who did their homework, but just for our reference, we'd like to know who did watch the video. %, yes, so just kind of split the group. So thank you for responding on that. And I'm not going to try and review what Linda covered in that, but was a nice overview, particularly that connection with brain research. This particular element just ties in with so much of the work that I've done the last several years around rigor and relevance. And many of you are familiar with the 4-quadrant model of the rigor relevance framework. The quote I like from Bill Daggett talks about relevance makes rigor possible, and how it becomes a pathway for students to achieve higher levels of learning when we bring relevance to instruction. And it was my experiences around that and understanding a lot of the neuroscience that Linda talks about that says this had to be one of the elements that we talk about in the career model. In each of the elements, there are 5 actions that we've identified for teachers to follow in better understanding what it means to connect with relevance in your instruction and define some of the dimensions of these particular statements. Here are the 5 that relate to connect with relevance. Activate students' interest in learning. So there needs to be something that is about generating some interest on the student perspective. The second one is about using authentic materials, data, and/or resources in making the instruction as authentic as possible for students. Students know when it's just busy work, and the more that we can take real-world problems that sometimes are a little bit messy, and materials may be hard to come by, but the more that we can do that, it conveys a message to students that this is real work and not just made-up work for the student. Another part of this is, and connecting with the student, is not only connecting to the real world, but connecting to their experience. And this is a piece that builds off the neuroscience, that the way our brain works is to take new information in and connect it to previous knowledge. Sometimes that's easy for students to do, or it may be easy for some students to do, but what can we do in instruction to help make those connections for students, that they're not just passing that information through their brain and losing it, but actually retaining it to use later on. The next one is to base learning experiences on real-world problems. And this goes beyond the authentic materials to really have problems that come from the community or come from real experiences that students recognize this is authentic work for them to be engaged in. And finally, the aspect of assessing application and knowledge. This ties in with the assessment component, that you just can't provide relevant learning experiences. You need to assess in a way that measures students' application of knowledge. So those are the 5 actions that describe connect with relevance. And I'd like to do another quick poll and have you indicate which of these you think is most important in helping students become career ready. So as we're thinking about those, which one of those strikes you as saying, yes, that's something we really need to focus on? So Gretchen, if you put the next poll question up. See an abbreviated version of each of the 5 statements there. Please pick which one you think is most important for students. Some interesting responses. Highest was based learning experiences on real-world problems. Guess I like to see that. And the second highest, 35%, was to activate students' interest in learning, and really recognizes how important relevance is to engagement. And I think as we go through our discussion today, you're going to see that connection, that our lesson plan is only as good as it gets students engaged, and challenging us to really activate students' interest in learning. So as we think about those, let me ask the question in a second poll that's just a little bit different from this. What action is the greatest challenge for teachers to accomplish? If we're trying to include all of those into our instruction, those of you that are teachers out there or administrators thinking about your teachers, which of these 5 do you think teachers really struggle with in planning their lessons? So pick your response and submit. Again, I might have predicted this. Activate students' interest in learning, 44%. So nearly half of the group picked that one. That's one of our real challenges in making the curriculum relevant to the student. And I think particularly as we talk about standards and so much content that we want students to develop, it does become one of the biggest challenges for teachers. Next, pretty close in some of the other areas, but that's the one that we really want to focus on. So let me now formally introduce my 2 colleagues, some teachers that have been practicing relevance in their classroom for some time. Nicky Morgan, health and physical education teacher, and Jessica Williams, now Dr. Jessica Williams. It's actually completed recently her doctoral program in family and consumer science at Newark Valley Middle School in Newark Valley, New York. As I mentioned before, they're online from home today as school was closed because of the wind chill in that area. I know it can get real cold in the southern tier as it was this morning. So welcome, Nicky and Jessica, and thank you for being a part of this webinar. And let me invite you to share a little bit of the experiences that you've had as teachers in bringing relevance to your students' experiences.
You want to go ahead and start, Nicky?
Sure. First, thank you, Dick, for having us. I think that I've been teaching for, this is my 15th year, and by using the Career Academy model that we use at Newark Valley Middle School, I have watched a shift between, as you put it, Dick, earlier, the busy work to kids being passionate and excited to come into class, because what we're doing and what they're researching and learning about actually has purpose, and they end up with ownership when they're done with at least my class, and I know Jessica can say the same thing, of what they're working on, and they can connect it to their lives and to the real world, and it just gives purpose to the assignments and the projects and the whole course.
Yep, I would agree, and thank you for having me too. The Career Academy model that we developed at Newark Valley, again, I haven't been teaching as long as Nicky, but it really, I guess, was the way that I wished I had the opportunity to learn, to be able, when I was in school, to be able to connect what was going on in the real world, but also to be able to connect what mattered to me as an individual person to what I was learning every day. And I think that that really has led to tremendous engagement and passion and purpose in our students because it is relevant not just to the real world, but to each child as an individual and his and her talents. So can you advance the first slide, Dick, for us? Thank you.
Okay. We're going to be talking today about a Career Academy model that we have developed and used at Newark Valley Middle School. Basically, students are asked what career they hope to pursue when they are older, and much of the curriculum is shaped around that specialty. Throughout the year, students are asked to view the given state curriculum or Common Core, based on whatever the subject area they're in, through the lens of a specific discipline. One example of this, and one which we feel is really a great example of relevant learning, was done in social studies class. Last year, during the presidential election, our students had to choose a candidate to endorse based on policies related to their own future profession. So, for example, a future engineer might look at both candidates' policies on green energy. A future early childhood educator might look at each candidate's policies on funding Head Start, where each candidate stood on important educational policies like No Child Left Behind. The project incorporated significant research, and students were able to use multiple online sources in order to discover the candidates' views. And that particular slide is an election poster that a student created comparing the two candidates. And that student was forensic science, as you can see there.
Okay. Next slide.
Yeah, next slide, please. And the previous slide, actually, they were looking at policies. The forensic scientist was looking at policies on funding for science research between the two candidates. So, and now this particular poster shows a future filmmaker's, it's a future filmmaker's poster. He examined funding for the arts. The critical thinking that occurred during this project was truly incredible. Many of our students were having more informed debates than many of the adults we knew during that election. Students understood the election process and the social and political issues tied to the election in a deeper and richer way than ever before. And we're talking about 7th grade students talking about the presidential election and understanding the whole process. Now, it was really great. Because students were examining the elections and the election process with an eye to the issues that matter to them and their personal futures, this project was highly relevant and engaging. Students talked about this project for months, and at the end of their 7th grade year, many students talked about how this was their favorite project.
Next slide.
Slide 3, please. Okay, so this was a project in my health class, and this particular student has a pretty funny looking costume on, but it was really awesome. She made that herself. In health class, students can choose to view any of my curriculum-centered health issues through the lens of their own discipline. Topics that are normally covered in 7th grade health include things like the dangers of tobacco, alcohol, and other drugs, HIV and AIDS and other STDs, internet safety, bullying. My course is a 10-week course, so there's a lot, crammed in there. The slide that you see here is of a future fashion designer who created a cigarette costume in order to give a talk on the dangers of nicotine addiction and cigarette smoking. So she made that completely, by herself on her own time and during class time, and then gave a presentation wearing the costume about the dangers of tobacco and nicotine addiction. Very creative. And this slide, other projects have included the exploration of the engineering of the e-cigarette. And this was done by an electrical engineer, a future electrical engineer. The brain development of children with fetal alcohol syndrome by future educators, the psychology of addiction by future psychologists, and the rate at which smokers' bodies decompose to that of a non-smoker by forensic scientists, and the role that drugs play in committing violent crimes by future police officers. These are just a few of the examples of student projects that have been presented in my health class.
Nikki, those are all incredible projects. Can you consider 7th grade students?
I'll tell you, these projects, I really am blown away every single 10 weeks by the projects that students come up with. I seriously do not give them any ideas on what to research. They connect it completely to what they're interested in and something that they want to tackle or address that's going on in society today. And it's just incredible, the level of thinking and just the creativity that I see from these students. I learn things every 10 weeks from my 7th grade students, things that I did not know. And I think that I get more excited, I think, than they do when I learn these new things. And it just, and I tell them every day, I am not an expert, and I learn things every day too, and that's the point of these projects, to just continue to dig deeper and see what you can find.
I think that's a key point, Nikki, to interrupt you. I think for teachers to recognize that they need to have a demeanor of being open to learn new things and not be thought about as the all-knowing expert within the classroom.
Right, absolutely. I find it's very boring for me to stand in front of the class and talk for 39 minutes, and again, my word is not the end-all be-all of health education. It's constantly, health is constantly evolving. I talk to the students about that. However, the fact that I can learn from my students, it brings it full circle. The relationship from the teacher standpoint with the students and the relationship that they're having with me as their teacher, it's just really, really phenomenal. And I'm so happy to be using this particular career model that we've been using for, Jess, 5 years, I think?
Yes.
5 years?
Yep, I would second or third, I guess, what you're saying there, in that we often start our classes by saying, we are educators, and so maybe we can claim some expertise in that, but we're certainly not doctors, we're not engineers, we're not police officers, and by the time, you've vested, 5 to 10 weeks into the school year, we really do expect you to be more of an expert than we are in many of these subject areas. And, I jokingly say, you might have to work a little harder to catch up with us if you want to be a teacher, or maybe be in psychology or human services. But the rest of it, we're still novice learners, and you are going to be the experts and be teaching us.
Absolutely. I actually had a student yesterday, our first day back after break, and we were talking about, we were getting ready to get into these projects. And we were talking, I actually said basically that same exact thing that Jessica just said, that I really don't know a lot about engineering, so you're going to have to teach me. That's what your projects are about. You have the opportunity to teach all of us about what you're interested in and how it connects to health and the health in the world today. And so I had one student who actually wants to be a physical education teacher when he gets older, and I also teach physical education. And, I kept saying, I'm not an expert in this, I'm not an expert in that. And he said, well, you're an expert in physical education and health. And I said, no, I really don't consider myself an expert, because I'm always learning more about the two subjects and anything about them. So And he goes, okay, well, you know a lot then. Maybe you're not an expert, but you know a lot. And I go, okay, I'll give you that. But I'm still not an expert. I'm not going to stand up here and tell you that I know everything there is to know. And that's the end of that, because I don't. So it was just really cool to have that conversation with the student. You know, there's nothing like it.
We do have a hand raised in the audience. Daniel Weigel, if you'd like to ask your question.
Yes. My question was about them choosing a career. Would you expect maybe elementary students, I'm in the 4th grade, would you expect 4th graders to target a specific career that they would be looking at so you could cater your lessons toward that?
Well, if I could speak to that one. Our work, it was originally designed around the enrichment triad model, which it was done by Renzulli out of the University of Connecticut. And the enrichment triad model was actually originally designed for elementary school students. We put a bit of a spin on it by relating it to careers, but in Renzulli's model, he does focus on asking elementary school students to pick a topic of interest. So if you had a student who was fascinated by bugs in 4th grade, you might go and have that child do more in-depth study on that topic. Necessarily relating it to being an entomologist maybe could be the end of it, but you could still dig deep for that kid into the study of some topic that was of deep or passionate interest to them and relate it to career either, you know, later or perhaps not as in-depth at the 7th grade level. But I do think that this model of teaching and learning can be focused around any passionate interest that a child has, even very young.
I agree, Jessica, and I think while younger students may not know the name of that particular career, they can describe some of their interests that you could relate to some career areas.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thanks for the question.
In my class in particular, they primarily, again, it's project-based learning through the creation of a project in health class. I compact my curriculum down as far as the content knowledge. Students are expected to be self-directed learners with the content knowledge. And then it's run basically, my class is run very much like it's a discussion class until we get into the projects. And there's a lot of really great discussions that we have that it's student-driven. And I basically just facilitate and keep order where it needs to be kept. But the students come up with basically the topics and the questions and to discuss and to debate in my class. Once we get into the projects, it's mostly internet-based with the use of technology. They use the internet and any other resources we have through our school library to do research. They can also get information from other teachers in the building who are in their particular field of interest, whether it's science or if there's a student who's in the medical field, they might go talk to not only science teachers but our school nurse as well as me. And you know, so there's lots of resources used within our building, but it's primarily in my class with my projects, it's primarily the technology that's used is specifically internet access, and then usually a PowerPoint is produced. But again, I give the students total freedom with that too. They can produce, like you saw in the prior slide, the fashion designer coming up with a costume that she designed to replicate a cigarette. So there's a lot of flexibility, and I think that that's incredibly important too, to not put too much restriction on the students. Okay.
And I know you've got some more slides you want to go through.
Yes, yep, we can go ahead and check out the next slide. Other classroom teachers, this one's particularly in our science class. And again, this is 7th grade. Our classroom teachers in other areas have incorporated this type of career academy model as well. Our science teacher has students view global warming through the lens of their own discipline. The future architect that's in this slide here is sharing information that she learned about the White Roof project, in which a group of environmentalist architects are working to cover black tar roofs with solar reflective white coating in order to reduce temperatures inside and out. The low-cost solution is a quick and easy way to cut carbon emissions, reduce risk of brownouts caused by stress on the power grid, and to save millions in energy costs and even save lives. I had the opportunity to actually, I guess, proofread or edit this particular student's project in an unrelated class before she submitted it to the science teacher, and I was just amazed at the level of the level of thinking. This was like a 12th grade project, easily. And it was just really, really phenomenal to see how deep this student went with her research. Our ELA teacher has also incorporated.
Oops, can you go back
I think
one?
that's.
There you go.
Yeah, sorry. Our ELA teacher has incorporated a research paper into her curriculum in which students write about a person who was influential in their field. So a future photographer may write about Ansel Adams, a future animal scientist may write about Temple Grandin. Our art teacher has redesigned her course so that students can engage in a graphic media design in order to advertise an idea or an intervention or an invention, excuse me, that might be added to their discipline. So it's kind of like, coming up with a new invention for, something with engineering or forensic science or human performance and nutrition. An early childhood educator might conceptualize and advertise a new toy for a 6 to 9 month old child, and a computer scientist might conceptualize and advertise a new video game. As you can see, these types of experiences remove the teacher from the role of the expert, like we've said. In fact, it's really impossible for us to be experts in engineering and medicine and forensics and creative writing, psychology, animal science, culinary arts, fashion design, and every other possible career that you can imagine. So instead, we step into the role of facilitator. We discuss, we question, we gather supplies, and in Jess's case, lots of supplies. And we provide venues for sharing what our students learn, create, and do. We provide those opportunities for them to explore. But we're far from the imparters of knowledge. These classrooms become collaborative spaces where we as the teachers are learning with the students and celebrating the new discoveries.
Okay, can you advance the slide for us? Thanks. So what we found that comes out of this developing expertise in our students is the opportunity to engage in relevant work at a young age. So after students have kind of studied the language of the discipline and read some nonfiction about problems that are going on out in the real world related to their career interests, understand some of the hard work that adults are engaging in to solve these real world problems, and studied some big names in the field, and they have all this kind of burgeoning expertise, we ask them to think of creative ways in which they can make a meaningful contribution to the world around them now, at this age. So we have future educators actually write lesson plans, submit them to a supervising teacher, and then once approved actually teach a class. And this young lady is teaching 4th grade, 7th grader teaching 4th grade. So you can advance the slide.
Ladies, I got a question from the field if you want to take that as an interruption while we've got it.
Of course.
Sure.
Seeing the diversity of projects here, and some of these very creative, and these are probably some of the best works. They're not all that creative. So the question is, how do you grade student work where you've got such a diversity of products, with some of them much more creative than others?
Do you want to go, Nikki?
Yeah, yes, that's a great question, and that is certainly something that Jessica and I worked together on for my class, because I struggled a little bit trying to come up with, how do I grade this, and you have all these different disciplines, and essentially I came up with a rubric to essentially grade them based on key elements that I'm looking for in their projects. So it's not necessarily discipline specific for, let's say, a forensic scientist, but I'm looking to see in my grading rubric, I'm looking to see in their projects, do they understand, first of all, their discipline? Can they communicate effectively as they're teaching the class? And have they connected their discipline with the health topic or the real world problem that they're trying to solve when it comes to comes to a health issue? I'm looking to see if they've made that connection between what their career is or what their discipline is and the content of my course. And if they've done that, and if they've done that, then that's basically what I'm looking for, in addition to being, like I said, communicating it effectively, not only verbally but also in writing in their project if they're doing a slideshow, and I'm looking for things like grammatical and spelling, but it's mostly, have you made that connection? Do you really understand what the project's about?
Yep, I would say the same. The grading is not discipline specific, but there are great ways to incorporate, your ELA Common Core when you're looking at these. Like Nikki said, are you communicating effectively? Are you able to conduct reliable research? Do you cite sources, things like that? And do you know how to give credit where credit is due to other thinkers and writers? But it's also, you can look at a lot of the 21st century skills and ask, are the students engaging in critical thinking? Are they mindfully reflecting, critiquing and analyzing what they've read and what they understand? So our rubrics are not discipline specific. And as I'm getting into these sort of application of knowledge components, I'll be very honest with you, the engagement and motivation of the student well surpasses any grade. So as I'm talking about these last slides, students will have already finished my course and received a grade based on many writing assignments, smaller projects, and so on. And it doesn't matter to them what they get on these final projects. They just keep going past the point of a grade, past the point of the quarter, sometimes all the way till the end of the school year. So the engagement, the grade, once they get up to this level of expertise, it doesn't seem to matter to the student what the grade is on these huge projects that I'm describing now.
That's really an exciting environment, but and I think you recognize it is an evolving process. Just as you've gotten better at developing these projects, you need to get better in developing the rubrics to evaluate the important part of the thinking that you're after. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. The rubric is not written in stone by any means, and it changes sometimes after one of my 10-week courses is over. I'm changing things because I'm seeing that there's something else that I really want to focus on and what I want to look at and what I want the students to get out of it. And just also to piggyback on what Jessica was talking about, she has her smaller projects as well, and that's the same in my class. They do have some some unit tests that they take on content knowledge, and they do have some smaller classwork assignments that do contribute to their overall 10-week grade. But the big project is that rubric that I was speaking about.
Great. Jessica, we interrupted you with that question. You want to get back to
Sure.
talking about the CEO?
Yeah. So this is a slide. These guys are future architects, and for their final project where they had to apply everything they had learned, they actually redesigned the middle school library, from drawing blueprints to having business meetings to working with the buildings and ground staff to move furniture, to painting, to raising money with the Parent-Teacher Student Association. And this is probably one of the best examples, or one of my favorite examples, of students who took Family and Consumer Science the first quarter and finished their project on the last day of school. So this is another example of some exciting and relevant work to future architects. You can change the slide. Okay, these are some future physicians, and they were invited to Binghamton University, which is about 30 minutes from where we work, to engage in labs that are done by the nursing students at Binghamton University. And they have, some of you may have seen these, they have these very advanced robots that actually exhibit symptoms. You can, the instructor hides behind, a one-way window, and they can make the robot talk and complain and say whatever they want to say. So our students were actually able to do labs that college students are engaging in, college nursing students are engaging in, and be provided feedback by the college level instructor. And these three students in particular were so enamored with this experience that they literally danced their way out of the university and just talked about how transforming it really was for them to be able to actually kind of play this role in a way that usually only much older students get to do. And then they, of course, came back to the middle school and shared that experience with their other peers who were studying things other than what they were. You can advance the slide.
Jessica, I got another question entered in here.
Yep.
Within these projects, a question about time. How much time do these projects take? And it seems like it can consume a great deal of time.
Well, yes, like I said before, these larger projects, students get a minimum of 5 weeks in my class to complete them. But if the student wants to continue working past the time the course is over, I make a commitment to them to continue to work with them on their time, either after school or during lunches. We don't have study halls anymore, but when we did, that was also time that we could work together. So, it does take a commitment from me as the teacher to continue with those students that are extremely engaged, or just want to keep going, I guess is the way to put it. But all students get, in my class, a 5-week time to complete these larger projects. If you're talking about, the science project, the social studies project, the ELA project, I think that teachers are dedicating varied amounts of time to that. Some teachers are, providing maybe a week of classroom time and then a week of home time. Or, that research paper that the ELA teacher did, she dedicated, I think, 8 weeks to that from beginning to end, because it's the first major research paper that students in our district are expected to write. So it varies, but these type of hands-on things can be quite time-consuming for sure.
And in health class, they get anywhere from 3 to 5 weeks to complete the project. Again, my course is a 10-week course, and then I see a different group of kids the next 10 weeks. What I have done in the past, Jessica and I, sometimes our course, the group of students that I have, goes to Family and Consumer Science the next marking period, or vice versa, and those particular students can continue to work on something maybe that they've done in FACS or health class in either Jessica or my classes. But yeah, it's
and
time is definitely at least for my class, time is definitely a challenge. It's a bit of a barrier because I am always feeling like I run out of time, but honestly, I think I could take 40 weeks to work with one group of students on one project. I mean, that's how involved it can get.
That's the benefit of this collaborative
But
model.
yeah, and it is a benefit, absolutely.
When students, the first 10 weeks are always most challenging, but as students develop expertise among other classes, if they did their social studies project already, if they've already had health, if they've already had art, they can continue to develop those ideas in the next course or in the next project, and it is less time consuming after they've developed this kind of, these beginning steps.
Yeah.
Jessica, another question
Yes.
About the working across all disciplines.
Yes.
You talked about examples from yours and a couple of science and social studies. How much has this practice permeated all of the courses within your school?
No, it has not permeated all the courses within our school. It has permeated all the courses within our grade level. Only 7th grade for now. And math is probably, to be honest with you, the subject area that struggles the most with this. They have a scripted curriculum this year that they really need to adhere to. But when we first started the model as a whole team, the math teacher actually reported a higher homework completion rate when she would give homework problems that just had a sentence related to the career that the child was studying. So the depth to which every teacher has to go is not the same, I don't think. Making these little connections helps in every subject area. One thing that the math teacher and I discussed, I think 2 years ago, was how ideal it would be to do the unit, 7th grade math requires a unit in statistics, and how useful it would be to be able to teach statistics through the lens of the discipline. So, what percentage of young adolescents report feeling anxiety during the school day for a future psychologist, for instance. So to make real-world meaning of the statistics unit in mathematics would be an easy connection for 7th grade curriculum, and I'm sure people with expertise in other grade levels can think of other good ways to connect that. But right now, in 7th grade, this is part of every classroom experience except for math, because this is our first year with this scripted curriculum, and she needs to get used to that. And that's it, I think. So all the other people are doing at least some of it.
Let me go back and ask, how did you guys get started with this? What was the genesis of all the effort that you've put in to make these changes?
I became interested in the enrichment triad model, which I described before, when I went to a summer program at the University of Connecticut, and I thought, after learning about it, that it was a perfect fit for career studies, which of course as a family and consumer science teacher is probably the biggest priority for me with my curriculum. So I started doing it in my classroom, and then Nicky kind of jumped on board, and then the core teachers really started to ask me, how are these kids still working on stuff for you once your class is over? And the kids themselves started to pull the core teachers in. So for example, we had a bunch of future attorneys doing a mock trial for Jefferson Davis, like bringing Jefferson Davis up on trial all these many years later. And they pulled the social studies teacher, they pulled all these people in to act as the jury. So the kids were reaching out to the other teachers, asking them, not directly, but asking them to get involved and to be part of this process. And once the other teachers saw the engagement, saw the passion, the ELA teacher was the third to join the group, and then after that, math, science, and social studies, and then after that, art. And so now we are, so I have to say, I think it was the kids that really pulled everyone together because they were so excited.
I agree.
That's great.
I agree. I was just going to say that, Jessica introduced this model to me, and because our two courses are so closely connected, I thought it was a great fit for health education. And I agree with Jessica. I think that the kids, their enthusiasm and their passion for what was going on in my class and in Jessica's class, I think that they just were they just were thirsty for more, and they wanted it in all of their classes.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a couple more questions, particularly related to assessment, and I'm kind of thinking ahead, both that we've just got a few minutes left, and also the next topic in this series is just around these assessing for proficiency issues and grading practices that we need to think about, and we've shown and heard about that connection today. I've got a couple minutes to wrap up. Anything additional, Jessica or Nikki, that you want to share at this point before I start a wrap up?
Yeah, really, it goes back to what Nikki, it goes back to what Nikki was saying before about the relationships that you're developing with students when you teach this way. And I think that's something that's really important to me, especially to talk about, is that when you ask kids of this age, what do you want to be when you grow up, you are asking a really deeply personal, fundamental question of adolescence, which is, tell me who you are, tell me what matters to you, tell me how you see the world, tell me how you plan to contribute. And I think once you understand that about your student, you can start to see the world through their eyes and show them a whole new level of respect and appreciation than you could before. And I think that relationship building is so critically important, that I am seeing the world through your eyes. You're not just seeing the world through mine. And without that really deeper understanding of a child at that age, I don't think any of this would be successful. I think that's so important to making meaningful experiences for kids, because kids will change their mind about what they want to be when they grow up, but it's probably the first time at that age that somebody has asked them, no, you tell me what you think matters, you tell me what you see. And I think that's critically important.
Well said. We talked early on in this about the biggest challenge for teachers being connecting to students, and as you said, Jessica, that really begins with getting to know the students and developing an authentic relationship with them, that they're willing to open up and share some of those aspirations that they have.
Can I beg one favor?
Sure.
Can you show the next slide? Just because I think it is the best slide for engagement. If you look at the kids' faces, this is a dissection, which normally kids don't get to do in middle school, at least not in Newark Valley. This is one of my favorite pictures, I think, of all time of this model, because every single kid's face is so wrapped up in their work, and I really love it. So thank you for showing that last one.
I love this. I love this picture too. It's very powerful.
That's what we're trying to get at, is that degree of engagement. Any comments you want to make? We did these last couple of text slides.
Well, I guess I would say, just very quickly, we have our kids enter a lot of contests, both state and national level, to share their work with a wider audience. We feel that's really important. And also, we do a lot of dress up, which might seem silly, but letting the kids see themselves in the uniform of the profession, actually in that role, I think makes the learning feel even more relevant, even more authentic, and it's also, of course, a lot of fun. And I think, we've done a little bit of research ourselves into what our kids are getting out of this experience, and I think, and what we found actually a lot, it's kind of a data mine, we found a lot of great stuff, but I think one of the key things related to this talk is that kids are gaining a sense of direction, a sense of vision for themselves, for their futures, and also that they are in love with what they're doing. They're developing sort of a passionate romance with a discipline. And in terms of engaging students, that is what it's all about. So if you can get kids just absolutely in love with what they're doing, then I think it will lead to really authentic college and career readiness. Not just can I pass a test, not just can I, not have to take a remediation course, but, am I going to have the resiliency and the passion and the interest to continue this really hard but purposeful work?
Well, I think your passion comes through as you've seen some success with students, but this is not easy, and I think particularly trying to change the culture within a whole school, and as we're rolling out standards and new assessments, everybody tends to get very conservative and protective of their individual responsibilities, and this really requires taking some risks and working together as a faculty to make this successful for students. But as you say, when you see students so engaged, that gives you the encouragement that this is worth the effort.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
just want to mention the surveys briefly, and thinking about how we get faculties engaged in this. The surveys are really designed to open up those conversations. And just on this one on Connect with Relevance, to have a group of teachers in your grade level team or within your department or even your school to go through that survey, reflect about their own instruction, and then open up some conversation. Are you connecting with students? Are you bringing in real world problems in the kinds of experiences that you're exposing to students? That will really get teachers thinking about their own instruction and open up a lot of possibilities. That's what the surveys are designed to do. The surveys are online now at the Technical Assistance Center website, nyctecenter.org. If you traverse to the section of the website that talks about the Career Instructional Model, you can look at the surveys. There also are a lot of resources there. We'll be putting up the webinars as useful resources, but also we've connected a number of videos, articles, books that provide you some great resources. Jessica's mentioned some of those. She was really helpful to me in putting together this initial list. For those of you that aren't in New York State, we also are expanding our efforts beyond New York with the Career Readiness Institute, so I put a plug in for that. You're going to hear more about that in the weeks ahead. But we're going to take the things that we've learned here in New York with the Technical Assistance Center and create a national network called the Career Readiness Institute, where we'll be sharing a lot of those resources. So I hope that you've enjoyed the workshop today. We appreciate your participation. We've kind of pushed the envelope as I made my colleagues get online and video and worried about their appearance. And Nicky even had to farm her kids out for a babysitter to keep the noise level down. I appreciate her efforts in doing that.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure.
We have 5 more webinars set up. You can see the dates for those. We'll be doing these on a weekly basis through the rest of the winter. So they hope that you will tune in for one of those. But continue to think about how we can ramp up instruction to make students more engaged and increase achievement around this notion of the career model. So thank you, Jessica and Nicky. I really appreciate your efforts in being a part of sharing some of the things that you've learned in this webinar this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On behalf of the Technical Assistance Center, I'd like to thank our presenters today as well as our attendees. As a reminder, this webinar was recorded and will be placed on the Technical Assistance Center website within 72 hours. That's nyctecenter.org. If you have any questions or suggestions regarding upcoming webinars, please contact us at ctetac@spnet.us.